This year marks 25 years since the South African National Editors Forum was established with the aim of protecting media freedom and promoting media ethics. Now, in a year dominated by COVID-19 and fake news, the role of the media has become all the more critical. Now, in South Africa, we have seen journalists come under attack as they report on events such as the recent violence and unrest in Kwa-Zulu Natal and parts of Gauteng. Against this environment, SANEF's Nat Nakasa Journalism Award will focus on the impact of COVID-19 on the work of journalists and the important role of media and that the media has played in the country. Now, to tell us more about this, we're joined by SANEF's project manager, Hopewell. Radebe. An absolute pleasure to be talking to you, Hopewell, this morning. Let's first talk about the importance of these awards, especially in such a difficult time for journalists in South Africa in particular.
A very good morning, sir. I don't think I can hear your volume all of a sudden.
Okay, Hopewell, I'll just ask you that question again, and hopefully you'll hear it better this time. Just talk to me about the importance of these awards.
Thank you for us. The Nat Nakasa, Nat Nakasa, in fact, was this great giant journalist who got the Nieman Fellowship, but was banned from ever coming back to South Africa. And he was a brave guy, and he wrote, and his pen was sharp, and he was analyzing South Africa in a manner that annoyed the establishment at the time. So we felt it has been going on for years now. It's about 23 years of Nat Nakasa, if I'm not mistaken. So this year we are looking really, according to the judges, they were looking at what has always been about Nat Nakasa, the bravery of journalists. And there were a lot of candidates that came forward, and many people looked at how many journalists weathered the storm, going and doing those very difficult stories in hospitals and among others. But I don't want to let the cat out of the bag and start saying, too much, because we announced the winner on the evening of the 14th of August. So I should be careful not to end up giving hints as to who has taken the award. But the adjudication is now complete.
Well, if I'm a journalist worth the name, Hopewell, hopefully by the end of this interview you might have let some form of a cat out of a bag. But I do assure you that that's not my aim with this interview. But now, of course, you speak about Nat Nakasa, a journalist that essentially was exiled, and you speak about how he embodied courageousness, how he embodied bravery, and these are just some of the key elements that the judges look at when they are adjudicating as to who will win this award. Can you talk to me about some of the other things that stand out for the judges when they look at a winner?
Yeah, what other things that the judges were looking at, all the entrants are always unique. Others are still stories about investigative journalism. They are about the courage that journalists have to go through, to find that credible information and make sure that they double check their sources, and they make sure that once the story is out there, it can stand the test of time, particularly with all the denials that will often follow. You find that even politicians would threaten to sue a journalist, will threaten to take you to court or have you arrested, but journalists do stand their ground and stand by the evidence that they brought forward. So it is in that context that the judges will also look at the credibility of that source, the credibility of the information of the journalist that has been published or broadcast, because we were looking at all platforms. So it's in that context. But also there is a second category for the Nat Nakasa Award, that of community journalism, the community media. So there were also what you call entrants that showed the courage done by journalists at the community media level. And sometimes it is even more challenging to be in a small town, and you find that you have to face and challenge the mayors and councillors, and they do threaten and intimidate journalists. But as you know, most mainstream media do hunt for good journalism from community media establishment. And community media establishment are the kind of a training ground for great journalism. So we are recognizing that. That's also what the judges were looking at.
As you speak, Hopewell, I'm looking at images of my colleagues who have done extraordinary work over the last couple of weeks and months, especially with all that's broken out in South Africa. Last year, the Nat Nakasa Award was awarded to the entire body of journalists. Obviously, this is as we were in a COVID-19 pandemic. It was a new ground for everyone in the world, ultimately. This year, not much different, but a lot has changed and a lot has happened since then. How different is the adjudication process this year, though?
I think it is back to its basis. It is back to where they were now looking for an individual outstanding body of work. It could be maybe a group of journalists that worked together to pull a great story together, or it could be an individual that did the investigation alone or broke the news. So they were back to what we call that courageous journalist that has done the work. It's the same with the grassroots, or should I say community media, where they looked at the body of work and or an individual journalist as to what has been done, as opposed to last year where really everybody was hunting sort of in the dark, but kind of soldiering on, and life-threatening situations which covered everybody. And you would know that we lost an estimated 10 journalists last year, and collectively now, from last year when the COVID started to this year, the figures are spreading towards 30 journalists, but I stand corrected. It could be one or two people left to 30, but it's been terrible for the media industry.
You mentioned that these Nat Nakasa Awards have been ongoing for about 2 decades now, and taking such a deep and closer look at the detail allows you to, I guess, plot certain lines within the world of journalism. Have you seen any trends, and have you seen any changes in how journalists and journalism has been affected perhaps by the advent of social media and other external forces?
I think even the way stories are done, both for you guys on broadcasting and even on print. And also remember, we now have the whole publications going online, and there's not a paper there, but there has been a convergence of these platforms. When you break a story, you tend to use social media to sort of whet the appetite of your audience and say, I am bringing this or that story, and it is explosive or whatever. And then once you have built up that appetite, you then have to live up to that expectation and make sure that your story stands its ground and it's worth what you were beating the drum about. So it is all these convergence of platforms that we are seeing at play. And when it comes to also even broadcasting, you find that broadcasters are no longer just telling their story, but they also make sure that they engage the public via social media. On an immediate story, they start wanting to know whether they have comment on this. These are new platforms that the previous journalism of my type and my kind at the time did not have all that at hand. You could not engage your audience immediately, but this technology has made you guys be more advantageous because you can sense immediately whether the story is resonating with the public or not immediately.
Of course, journalists live in the households of the public. The Nat Nakasa Awards are, the journalists are sort of selected or voted for by, what's the word that I'm looking for? Chosen, for lack of a better word, it just escapes me now, by the public, if I'm not mistaken, and then there is a panel of judges who then go through the voting. Can you just talk to me about that process, how it plays itself out?
Yeah, the process is inclusive. Your editor, for example, can nominate you. Members of the public can nominate a journalist and say, we have been impressed by the journalist or this particular journalist about this particular story or stories, because sometimes they bring a body of work of that particular journalist. So it makes it a bit complicated for the judges. These are seasoned journalists, the judges, that include Abontate Joe Tolwe, and they have to look at all this and look at the categories and see whether it happens. But also the journalist can nominate him or herself. It's just that when you are standing up against people who have been chosen by the public or being chosen by their newsroom editors and so on, you can tell that you're going to find some challenges there. So it is what you call a cutting edge kind of adjudication that comes into play, because they have to take into consideration all these nominations and also motivation, because people write a motivation and say it is on these grounds that I believe this is a deserving journalist for this particular story or story body of work. So when you look at it, really, it's not just Hopewell Radebe saying that I think I'm good. It often comes better if sometimes it comes from your peers. They see you as one who has done an outstanding work on this particular story. So it brings all those elements together.
SANEF's project manager, Hopewell Radebe, thank you so much for your time this morning, sir. As we talk Nat Nakasa Journalism Awards, the winner will be announced on the 14th of August.